Dobrý. My to vidíme.
Nejsme vidět všichni.
Na tom streamu teďka, jde to nějak s tou kamerou, abychom byli vidět úplně všichni?
Já jsem to fokusovat na vás, protože jste druhý. Jo, my tam koukáme na ten. Tak to má spoždění, to má delay.
Jo, takhle, dobrý.
Teďka vidíš.
Kluci jsou důležitější. Já taky. Sorry for that. Tak kdo mi dá zelenou teďka, kluci? Myslím jako zelenou. Ale samozřejmě peppermintku můžeme taky. Dobrý? So guys, we are terribly sorry for delay. We didn't have a time to set it up properly. So right here, right now, warm welcome on Anifilm in Liberec. Warm welcome on Poslední Podcast YouTube. There is a big panel called Publishers Power Play, which Power Play usually means something like numeric advance. So I'm glad that we don't have like publishers, you as publishers do not have advantage. The panel is great for those who are interested in gaming industry, especially publishing, or more precisely, if you want to make your game, get a publisher, then you're on the very right place. From my point of view, it's the strongest panel we ever have in like Czech history, and I'm going to tell you why. Let me introduce our guests alphabetically. Allan Adham, Content and Acquisition Lead from Everplay Group. Big applause. Thank you. If you do not know Everplay Group, then I'm pretty sure you know Team 17, which is a part of the group. As I would like to mention Worms. You will understand why. Allan is from Manchester, UK. Henner Bruhn, Business Development Manager from Calypso Media Group. Big applause. Thank you. The company is based in Worms, Germany.
It is.
So how do you call it? Do you call it Worms or Worms? Worms. Worms. So that's lovely connection. Worms game. Worms as a headquarters. Mario Gerhold, Global Brand and Marketing Manager, Director from Night Peak / My Games. From München, Germany as well. And last but not least, Vladimír Gersl, Founder and CEO of Cybercell Consulting and platform Sale.game from Prague or Hradec Králové? Okay. So guys, thank you all for coming to Liberec. Thank you the audience as well. My first question is there anybody who, as a child, you dream about, be like cowboy, cosmonaut? Anybody wanted to be a game publisher? Okay. So Mr. Masura is the only one. I didn't expect that, but great. But guys, I will start with you. How did you get into game publishing?
So I actually graduated from university with a master's degree in games design, so I knew that I wanted to be involved in gaming. And while I have a master's, I've never designed a game. I always felt that the business side was a lot more fun. You get to do a lot more things. And 15 years later, it was, I think I helped 3 publishers build a publishing brand, and then basically moved over to Team 17 and Everplay mid last year. It's been fantastic. I've probably seen now of my career 8,000 pitches, maybe something close to that now. It's a lot. Played about 4,000 demos.
That would be great. To mention how many pitches did you see in your
about 8,000. I'd say over the course of my career of the publishing side, about 8,000 pitches I've seen.
Awesome, brilliant.
It's a lot.
So let's see, Henner, if your way to publishing and how many pitch decks did you see?
I didn't count any pitch deck, I have to say. So, but I would say it's below the 1,000 mark, something like that. So something in the hundreds, I would say.
All right.
And I started out after school being part of the music industry because it's my main interest at that time. So it was late 80s, I have to say, so something like that. Not really like in a video game industry year, late 80s. So music was my first love, and after that I kind of moved on from music to something like my second love, which was video gaming at that time. And I was lucky enough to find a place somewhere in pretty close to my hometown in Hamburg, where I started out making a software publisher who belonged to something like a very German, old-fashioned book publishing industry. Like Duden, maybe anybody knows when I'm talking about German and Duden, it's more like a dictionary, I would say. And they started out to enhance their portfolio from software to games. So like I was kind of the one to make it more modern, I would say, and I loved that very much, so I made it into games in early 2000s, I would say.
Thank you. So currently in Calypso Media, and
Yeah, that's funny because in the 80s I started gaming with the C64 before I joined also the music industry for a couple of years, but always focused on the marketing side. And I wanted definitely to get into the games industry, and I had a funny story. I had an interview, and the interview was done with the development director because apparently that person that was meant to have the interview with me back then in 2001 haven't had time. So after the interview, everybody said, "You're great, you're coming to the team." And then I said, "Oh, great, when do I see the rest of the marketing team?" I said, "Oh, I'm the development director, you will come to the development team." And I said, "I have no experience from development." He said, "You organize shit, you did this on a global or European scale." I said, "Yeah, but it's music, it's not gaming." He said, "No, you are perfect." So I was 2 years as an external producer with CDV, if someone remembers. CDV, if you remember this, yeah. And then I had the chance to go back to marketing, which I happily did. And I was then leading 10 years the German-speaking areas for Koch Media, and then another 10 years global international marketing. And I don't recall how many pitch decks I've seen. I'm so sorry, but so you can stalk me.
Roughly.
I don't know, in thousands, I would also say, yeah. But you can stalk me on Moby Games. There you can see at least the credits I'm in. That is officially around 3-digit figures, so that's okay.
Awesome.
Thank you. So I have never been in the music industry. Actually, my oldest daughter was always crying when I started to sing. But other than that, I started doing games 2001. And from 2010, I started working with big publishers, Activision, later Sony, Koch Media. My part was mostly on the other side, on the developer side, but I was also helping some friend publishing houses search for games, and then we swapped that into our main focus, main job. So now we are working with many publishers on the different scale, but we don't act as a publisher, but as a intermediate agency, let's say.
We promised that we will give you a deep dive into how to secure a deal or how to get to publishers. So I think we all agree that publishers are overwhelmed these days with pitches and with projects. So imagine that you are an indie, AAA, AA developer. Your advice how to get to publisher, how to approach you. Mario, you can start. We will go like this with the microphone. We must go this way.
Yeah, no worries. So as I've been most of my time on the publisher side, always reach out to the BizDev team. That's the BizDev managers, whoever is there as a direct appointee, and prepare yourself with a pitch deck, ideally some video footage, and if you can, and that has also changed, I would say, in the last decade or so, that you want to provide a vertical slice to show what the game is all about, and not just, we back in the days, we signed games on paper, on an idea that is written, and then it was produced, and has totally changed compared to what was written on paper, for example. So that's my advice. And of course, we will talk about this later on. You can also consider self-publishing at one point if you do not want to work with publishers or do not want to have the help of publishers.
It's kind of a tough question. Do they really need publishers? So I keep it for later, you know.
I would say that I'm mostly impressed by facts and not only by thoughts and dreams and something like that. So many times when I see a pitch deck which consists mainly of that could be this or that could be that, that's not really in my interest to get somebody's dreams. I would see somebody doing a very good job with his dreams and make it like facts that I can just say yes or no to.
So facts are like playable these days, certainly.
Playable, maybe it's more like the playable is very nice, but it needs to be something like not only a concept, it needs to be even more like vertical slice is really the best, I would say.
I mean, what makes it interesting for me is knowing that the developer has done their homework, right? Because all of us, you know, as we're growing up, we always want to make the game that we've always wanted to play. We don't know how big that audience actually is. So for me, what makes it exciting is to see that they've done their homework. They know who they're building it for. They know there's a marketplace for it. There's a space on the market. They're not just building the same game that's already out there, but with a different skin. And then similar to these folks, like the build is important. For me, I don't need it fully fleshed out. I just need to know it's fun. You know, finding that little core loop to show me that, you know, this game could just be built out over time. But if it's fun, and I can, you know, I literally put the demo down after 20 minutes and go, damn it, I want to play it again, then I'm hooked, you know, and then that paired with a really good pitch deck would definitely get me excited.
So focus about, sorry.
If I can add to it, so from our perspective, because our perspective is a bit different, we have benefit of knowing what different publishers want, and I can tell you that like there are different needs, different wishes, different DNAs publishers are looking for, but there is a standard structure or like things that should be included in every pitch deck, and that's what many developers are not doing. They are not focusing often on their business numbers, on the technical side, on the project side of the thing, you know, on the KPIs, amount of views, you know, things that can help publishers to somehow validate not only the idea if it's fun, but also the whole business case if it's hopefully profitable and lower risk. And that's also why, and I guess we will get to it later, why we built the platform for this, because there is a certain structure you can based or you can follow, and most of publishers will be happy to see all of those data. And then I think what's important to also understand if you are reaching the right publisher, because that's close to the question you will have later, but also there are bad or good and worse publishers, you know, but it's also that you need to understand their target audience. If you're giving them the game they need, or you know, if they can benefit, or if you can benefit from their audience, so you can have more wish lists, more sales, and so on. So it's also about doing homework. Which publisher might be the good fit for you, and not just shooting it in a wild range, but being focused. Understand what that publisher needs, try to understand what is his portfolio, maybe use that portfolio in your references, and so on. So be more tailored for specific publishers.
You mentioned pitch deck, so one common mistake they do in pitch deck. Start from Mario. Yeah, we have to go zigzag.
Inconsistency is something. If you have something written on the first slide, that should be aligned with what is then coming on the next slide or the end of the presentation. If you have like mismatching messages, that is something that stands out. I would say from pitch deck point of view, and that homework. You said homework, right? Do your homework, and Google is or nowadays AI is really helpful for you in doing this homework.
Or use consulting companies.
And consulting companies.
The worst that can happen is you have a pencil drawing and you ask for 2 million. So why? There's always the question why. And whenever I see a pitch deck, when everybody's like okay with the idea, that's nice, but it has to be like not really fully finished, but a full circle, like 360 degrees. Everything about the game should be in this presentation. Everything. That's all.
Okay. Allan?
I think for me, it's the lack of focus through the pitch deck, in the sense of the idea is you want to tell a story of what this game is going to be, what features are going to be in it, and then it's just finding that they lean too far into one to speak about all of these amazing gameplay features, but then I get to the end slide and there's no budget. You know, I don't know how many people are going to be making this game. And you'd be surprised how common that actually is, that I get to the end of a deck and someone says to me, what game, how much is this going to be made and how long is it going to take? It's, I shrug and I don't really know. So you'd be surprised. Just make sure that that budget slide and, that production slide is in there. It's a godsend, because sometimes they're so busy, they won't even respond to you. So if you've basically lost out on an opportunity with a publisher because you've not told them two really important parts of information.
If I may,
Yeah, of course.
If I may add to this, if you just put a number like this is our budget, beware that you should break down where this number is coming from. And I always appreciate if there's a strong emotional opener at the beginning and not just, we are doing 20 maps with so many polygons. Okay, yeah, well, that's not really unique. So the uniqueness is something that I would put at the beginning with a strong start and then an emotional hook at the end.
The uniqueness, yeah. Sorry.
No worries. I think there is many things, and we are trying to educate those developers we work with what things are missing, and we mentioned that. From my point of view, one of the biggest mistake is to not do a proper research about your unique selling points, and you cannot imagine how many times we have pitch decks with unique selling points that are really not unique, that are everywhere else. So unique selling point is really the main thing for your game, the tagline that will be written on your box, the thing that should in head of publisher sell the game. And if it's not the unique enough, if you didn't do your homework and just started to prototype because you think it's unique, that's I think the really big mistake. And one more maybe is the bad timing. Like with many we see, and our colleague Guillaume was calling it Drunken Mondays, when they were receiving in their plugin digital like a lot of pitch decks that went straight to the trash. You have usually one shot with your game for the same publisher. So sending them, something that is really just half finished, in the wrong timing with no proper prototype or not enough data, usually means you miss the shot.
I would stay with the uniqueness, which is the thing I'm hearing a lot from publishers, which is quite undescribable. Like I understand that you're looking for something unique, but from what point of view? Like for you, Mario?
I mean, a uniqueness is, for example, I had the pleasure to work with Warhol Studios, and they had the tagline, Dungeons, No Dragons. Mm-hmm. That was immediately creating a visual in your brain, and you could rely on this because that was the hook. you would wonder, why are there no dragons? And what's going on? And while this was working great, of course, in Central Europe, when I did the international marketing for the US, Bohemia means nothing, and 1403 is not really appealing for US salespeople. So there was a different pitch deck that was created all around action RPG with swords. And it's the same like the movie Jan Žižka. It's called Jan Žižka, and it's called medieval outside. So this is also an example how you need to tailor the decks.
Some example of uniqueness, Henner?
Of uniqueness in terms of adjustments and adaptation.
Good.
I have to say uniqueness is a nice thing, but it's not really like my main interest. My main interest is it sellable somehow. So maybe if you go not really copy paste something like that, but if you take something like a very successful game and you do something in the sense of this successful game, I don't think that's really a big mistake. So in the end, it's something like we all do this kind of for fun, but at least for money. So all in all, it's money and it's business, and it needs to be something like business. I'm not impressed by huge technical, super whatsoever visions. I'm mostly impressed by sales numbers.
To me, uniqueness doesn't really come off, it has to look very different to other games in the genre. It's a very competitive space, as we all know, there's like 3,000 games that hit Steam every month. And it's just figuring out how do you differentiate your game from what's already on the market. And I think one of the biggest things you can do that will help with the uniqueness is you draw up a table, basically put your game on the first row and get a bunch of comparable games and just go through. Is my gameplay different? Is the art play different? Is the design different? What is going to be good about my game, and has it already been done? You very quickly see, if there's ticks and crosses along the chart, then you found something a little bit different. Yeah, it might be in a popular genre, but you can now go, well, the marketing team can go, well, there is something quite special about this. It's not unique. It's just that you've managed to find a little section or maybe a big section of an already popular marketplace to go, well, people want something like this, just I've thought of it first. Or you hope you've thought of it first and you get to market first. So for me, gameplays don't need to be like, this crazy thing that looks really unique visually and gameplay. It's just making sure you have something in there that you think, okay, if I was to go my one big selling point, this is it. And I think this is one of the big things that publishers will look for, that you really need one or two special things about your game that the marketing team can go, we believe in it, and this is what the messaging we can get behind.
I also think it's good to look at it from the perspective of the audience. Like when we were doing hunting games, for example, the uniqueness was, quite subtle from outside point of view, except of big plastic gun we were selling in Walmart with that. But it was selling well because it was unique enough in the genre. So it's good to look at it from this perspective, and also from the kind of scale of the game perspective. If I worked most of my career in like AA space, and you had to be unique enough to be sellable. But you're competing, or you were, because AA space is now, I don't want to say dead, but it's shrunk down a lot. But you need to be unique enough to compete against AAA titles, for example, because you were selling for $40 versus $60. So in people's head, it's somehow close, but not crazy unique, not crazy wild as indie games, for example. So I think it's also good to understand the uniqueness in this scale of the game, size of the game, and type of the audience.
Allan, you mentioned like marketing, which is certainly Mario expertise. What about? I know that there are publishers who like doesn't want developers to do any marketing, like no Steam page, but there are a lot of publishers who wants to see the wishlist numbers, which is really hard to do, like both. So, do you prefer developers to make their own marketing kind of, social media wishlist as well?
So I have a belief that game design now needs to evolve. Like when you're building a game and a studio itself, that if it's a 5-person team, you should have someone, 4 people who make the game, but then the 5th person should be more marketing, social, and commercially focused. The idea is you want to build a brand for the game, for the company, and one of the best ways to do that is using stuff like social media, building out a Discord, because at the end of the day, you're getting people into your game. They can help you understand, do people want this? Do they like it? Do they like the features? I'm sure we've all been there, that we've seen games that we actively have been involved in one way or another that, we're not named in the credits. We're just happy to be involved and kind of seeing what's under the hood and being excited about games that are being played. So for me, I think it's really important for whether, a developer has a dedicated person for it, but at least they keep in mind as they're starting the development, build out your socials, build out a Discord, don't be shy about posting about what you're doing. Yes, it is hard to drive towards wish lists, but some of the stuff I'm talking about is free. It takes time to build that out, but at the end of the day, that when you come time to release, you've got a Discord of a few thousand people. That's a few thousand people that can go straight for a wish list. So I think it's a good thing to do from the start, because I think it will only help, and it will also validate what you're building, because if no one's interested in it, maybe you have to have a real conversation as to why no one's interested, rather than going, oh, I'm not good at social media. It's a case of just, spam as much as you can, show as many people, join groups, Reddit, Discord, and you'd be surprised that the communities actually, they love to share.
I don't have that many takes on marketing, but in my mind, why is marketing a thing? Is it common for the games industry? No, it's common for everything. You market everything, you bring everything to market that you would like to sell. So you need to have marketing, and you need some assets for that, and you need some pros for that, and you need some audience for that, and you need to get people interested in what you're producing. So marketing is pretty much a must for everything, also for games.
Mm-hmm.
And circling back to the question, should the developer start or with Steam page and whatnot? I would say definitely yes. From my experience, the publisher steps in when the developer is in a different phase. So at the beginning of a development, there's enough time to be on social and to handle this. But then when you are coming to beta, for example, beta phase, you might not have that time anymore unless you have a dedicated marketing person in the development team, which I also appreciate very much, but not all the teams can afford this. And then the publisher steps in, and while the developer is then mostly speaking in English language, you as a good publisher would want to multiply this. You want to take care of Chinese market, of Japanese markets, and you need to then think of localizing the content, the assets, improving the store pages, and so on. And yes, all this delivers KPIs. You have the views on the videos, the engagement of the videos. You see, with certain tools, you see, oh my gosh, I have a gap in France. It's behind, while it is a key market, it should have more views. So you can also identify gaps and adjust this from your marketing point of view.
So from big data speaking, I think we are working now with more than 200 publishers, 220 something. And when we are pitching them any game, I would say definitely 80% is asking about wish lists. So not everyone, someone has maybe different approach. There are publishers, specific publishers, first parties that they don't want your game to be out and known, but most of them is interested in wish lists. And one more thing I would like to add, and I think it's one of the biggest challenges now, and it's connected with what Allan said. I think when you look at the mobile games, they are built around retention, how to keep people playing, going back to your game. We, in our industry of premium games, we don't have this concept. We were often just releasing the game and go and do another game, not live support, spend a lot of money before the release. I think that's a big challenge for us now, because now there is 3,000 games going out every month, but we are not structured in our teams, and some publishers are also missing this post-launch publishing strategies. We are not structured around live ops, around supporting the product enough long. And that's also important part. Thinking about retention, not in mobile point of view, but how to keep your players interested in the game after the release. So I don't think now it's only about how many wishlists you have before the release, but how you can also scale up your wishlists and convert your wishlists after the release.
We are in slightly weird times where games should not be just fun to play, but fun to watch as well. Do you consider something like I call Twitch potential in your games? Might be kick potential in the near future?
I would call it virality. So is it going to have the potential to go viral? And is there enough reason inside the game, the videos, the marketing assets that you're going to share, talk about it, and be engaged? So if you are missing that point, it's a harder ride from the marketing side, yeah? And if you are hitting that sweet spot and you need to define the channel, it could be TikTok, it could be Reddit, it could be Discord, then you see the overspill. So you put out an asset and then it has so many views in the first days, and then you see the next weeks, and then you see if you have a viral effect or not. But if it helps, yeah. It also helps wishlisting, because you can immediately connect the wishlist peak to the asset and the overspill.
Yeah, we're always mentioning the term wishlisting, and to me it's more or less like my main reason for a successful game is converting wish lists into actual buyers and gamers and something like that. So that's something that I recognized in the past months, that it's really an issue to convert wish lists into sales. And for that, I would say it helps a lot if you spread out the news as far as possible. And as Mario said, if you go viral, nothing helps you more than people speaking about your game or whatever might be your idea or something like that. So in the end, it all comes together with marketing, with going viral, with good quality, with being open to your community, share everything you have, and mostly share everything like while you are improving down the road from here to there to bring out the best game you can.
For me, the gaming design obviously has changed. 10 years ago, people wouldn't care if people were interested watching someone play their game over their shoulder. But now it's that's the audience we're building for. They want to be able to watch someone play it, and they may end up watching a Twitch stream and go, "That game looks great. Let's give it a try." It's basically just become a bit of a foundation in kind of across the game development for me to have a game that looks fairly interesting to watch over someone's shoulder. The more viral it can be, the better. At that point, the virality will just shoot through the roof, and one TikTok and it all goes bananas. But you never know. It's the idea is you want to try and hit as many points across these kind of marketing fronts as possible. So having something that does look fun over someone's shoulder, you'd be surprised how impactful that can be. It's something that the marketing team will think of. You should be thinking of from a development side of, would I play this game if I was to just literally walk past someone and look at it and go, that looks cool? because you'll be surprised how much that will then convert into wish list and convert into just new people coming, or even they've played it before and they come back and there's DLC, they go, oh, I forgot I played this game before. Oh, great, it's got some cool new stuff. Let's go back and basically reconvert people that have already played. I do think it is a fundamental now to think about this. How much you want to integrate it is entirely up to you, but you should always be thinking, if I was looking at this over someone's shoulder, would I play it?
Yeah, I'm watching at it from the perspective of game designer that I used to be, and I definitely think it got changed, especially for those genres that are very famous for like Twitch and like crazy games like Goat Simulator we talked about, for example. So some games can be built only around virality, but I think overall it is good to keep in mind how well, because when we were building games 15 years, 20 years ago, we were thinking how it will be treated in outlets, how journalists will speak about game. Now, and I don't mean it in the wrong way, but journalists' articles don't affect sales a lot, but content creators do way more. So it's definitely good to keep it in mind, how big potential it has to make some fun new videos, find some interesting content. Again, it is probably different for Calypso with some more serious strategy game, but I think the virality and having enough interesting content to be able to stream variable videos, it's important.
I think Tropico is pretty viable. Okay, I don't want to go there. Wishlist. You mentioned wishlist, and there is like kind of there is some hidden number. It triggers Steam algorithms. Steam doesn't share it. So what are the like minimum wishlists you are thinking about when you see the game with wishlists?
So maybe I start, so it's easier. So again, it's different. So some publishers have hard limits before releasing the game. For example, 100K wishlists before we release the game. Now, when we are speaking about signing game, again, some publishers find interesting 20K wishlists. Some publishers for small games are fine with like 10K, some are bored from 80K wishlist. So again, this is about potential the publisher or some KPIs they have in head. For one-man team, having 10 plus wishlist, 10K plus wishlists is, I think, good enough. I know that number for releasing the game and being visible used to be like 7,000 or 9,000. I don't remember exactly. One more
6-7.
Exactly. One more thing I want to mention about wishlist, and I think that's also important. There is a huge difference about convertibility of wishlists based on their age, kind of. So if you have wishlists that are 6 months and older, it's way harder to activate them than the new wishlist. So also some publishers are even asking about this, and especially about the Next Fest, because there, if you multiply wishlists before the release, those wishlists will be activated way easier than those that are 2 years old.
You had an additional question about the Next Fest. Steam Next Fest. Should they do it or should not? So number of wish lists, and should they do Next Fest before you sign them?
Number of wish lists, from my experience, we are talking 500,000 to 1 million. That moves the algorithm and gives you exposure and someone calling you. Yeah?
Okay.
So that's the number. And I can tell because I have currently a project which has surpassed the 600,000, and that makes fun. Yeah, that's Steam only. There's also wish listing on console. Numbers are slightly different because Xbox, I would say, is not as strong as, for example, Steam in wish listing. There's a different consumption behavior there. And for Nintendo, you start very late because you need to have a certain readiness of the game so you can start wish listing. So wish list is great. And you should do as big numbers as possible, because the conversion numbers are going down in the recent years, where we had like 10, 15%. I would say now we are talking more on day one, 7, 8%. The next question was Steam Next Fest. Should you attend only if you have an overwhelmingly very positive demo? So you should test your demo with focus groups. Just going out with a demo on Steam Next Fest to be in time for the Steam Next Fest, and the demo is broken or buggy, I'm not looking at you, Henner, then I would not do it. Yeah. No, I was referring to a game.
Responsible for that.
I was referring to a game that I love. I have to admit, I'm a big fan of Calypso games, and there was a demo released which did not convince me, but the demo has been upgraded. I can only recommend it. Please play it. It's Sudden Strike 5 advertisement. And so Steam Next Fest, and if you have an okayish demo, I would also not do it. It really needs to be in that mark of high 80s, because there are, I think in the beginning of the year, Steam Next Fest had seen 2,800 demos. So you have the same battle for awareness, and only if you're in the top 20, you get the extra exposure from Steam, the extension, and the global call-out.
So if you already mentioned Sudden Strike 5, I have to say we re-released the demo afterwards, after Next Fest, and we added this demo rebuild to the main game page itself. So not really using Next Fest or any other stage for that. It was really depending on only the game itself. And we learned a lot from that, because afterwards, a lot of guys that kind of wasn't really in love with what we released during Next Fest, they came back to us and said, we see you listen to us, and we see you listen to what we say. And that was kind of the community, how do you call it, the community recall that made us really improve the game, not only the demo, the game itself to be released afterwards also. So just talking about releasing a demo during Next Fest, I have to say you're 1 out of 1,000. And afterwards, struggling with the community to make your game better really makes a lot of sense.
For me, it's whether you want to, like, what the potential publisher you're chatting with is, if you're looking for funding and stuff like that. Because the publishers I've worked for in the past, if you've already done your Next Fest and you're still 12 months out, 18 months out, we feel like you've basically taken away a huge marketing opportunity. So for us, it actually becomes a little bit of a negative against a game that you've already released it, and that's fine. But that should have been a pinnacle marketing beat for a publisher to take on, because this is why you go to a publisher, because they've got the money to get in front of the right people to spend on marketing and stuff like that. So it depends if you're going the self-publishing route or if you're going with a publisher. But for me, and kind of my experience across, the varied publishers, we're quite averse, developers, doing a Next Fest, because we think that, not to sound horrible, but that we could probably do it better. We can probably leverage it in ways that you can't, and we don't want to see it taken away. We could probably, probably exponentially get a lot more wish lists through a Next Fest, because we probably got great, relationships with first party. Again, that's what you're coming to a publisher for. So, but everyone obviously looks at it differently. And then what was the question about wish lists?
Well, the number of wish lists.
So wish list for us is more about budget size. It's one of those ones where if there's a budget size for $200,000, we can't be expecting you to have 250,000 wish lists. You've got to correlate between the size of the game, but it also comes down to genre. We are understanding of certain genres, wish lists are more important. The wish list conversions have changed. Going back a while, you'd be looking at 10 to 15%. Now, 6 to 8, depending on the genre. Again, it was all genre specific. So for us, depending on the budget you're spending and the genre will dictate how many wish lists you think you should get. If you've got a game that you've spent millions of dollars on development, yeah, should have 500 to 500,000 to a million wish lists, because that makes sense. But a small indie game, it would be very unrealistic unless something's gone gangbusters to have hundreds of thousands of wish lists.
All right, let's go through the process of signing a game. So you get it. Sorry, you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to add that, and I really forgot to mention what you did perfectly, that the genre is really a thing. So we do see differences in different genres, talking RTS, RTT, RPG, maybe some management simulation games, when it comes to conversion rates for the first day of the release. So the RTS, RTT is really a different beast, I have to say.
All right, thanks. Let's go through the process. They get in touch. There is some interest, negotiation between developers and publishers, and agreement. We have some, young, promising developers here, and you are publishers. So, are there any traps, in the agreements the developers should avoid? I know it's kind of, shooting in your own line, but.
I mean, I feel as though the industry now has become quite fair. I think a lot of publishers, maybe there is a small handful, but a lot of publishers actually have quite similar terms. I mean, without going into too much, over the 4 publishers I've worked with, the terms don't vary a great deal. What actually varies is the commitments from the publisher themselves. So what they're likely to commit to, what they want to offer, what the revenue share terms might be. Again, the one thing I will always say to the developers is, talk to fellow developers. They will probably give you insights to working with a publisher that you simply cannot get without working with a publisher. So for me, it's a case of, share your pitch deck, share your builds with the publishers. They'll obviously review it. Hopefully they'll give you a time frame to how long this will be. I think that's a big thing for you guys to ask, is how long will this take? The review process, can we expect an answer in 2, 3, 4 weeks, or is it months? You don't want to submit something at GDC and get an answer at Gamescom. It's crazy. So ask for a timeline. Majority of them will always give you a timeline of what's going on. A lot of the scouts and the BD people will happily keep you updated if you want to get in touch. I'd always say, don't sit in silence and worry. Feel free to reach out. A lot of them will respond to you. And then it's varying processes from publisher to publisher to how long the game gets into getting the signature on paper. I've done it in 6 weeks, I've done it in 6 months. So it really depends on the game, the criteria, the love and want for the game internally. So it will genuinely differ.
So that basically you answered my next question. But certainly, any traps in publisher deals, and the expected timeline from, reviewing the game to signing an agreement.
So I would say, if you see your publisher as a partner, or same way, the other way around, if you see as a publisher your development studio as a partner, there has to be something like certain rules that you both commit on. And you have to be very honest while committing to whatever might be the clauses in between both ways. And that's something like, a contract is not only something that has to be done, a contract really sets up the rules how to cooperate somehow. So there's not only restrictions, there's also some wiggle room in some different phrases where you can go for, maybe you should really do very carefully your homework to read every line in every contract, because maybe some publishers will ask you, you committed on that, so maybe you should deliver that also. And the other question was?
The timeline?
The timeline. I guess it depends always on what might be there to review on. If you go for something like only a pitch deck with 20 slides, something like that, that could be done in between a week or 2. if you go for something like we need a playable and we have this and that and back and forth and maybe some multiplayer sessions at all, that could be something like a year. So it's not really like I would fear somebody to take some time for a good evaluation.
In regards to the timing, I think that has all been said perfectly. I would give the advice to avoid critical time phases of a publisher, which is year-end or fiscal year-end or quarterly end or reportings, especially with stock-listed companies, because there is a different focus. In regards to the contract, I would strongly recommend to, if you commit to something as a developer in a contract, you should then be aware that you will be held accountable for this. So either you should be more vague in the contract or something like this, and you should share with what you sign for the studio with the whole studio. So you have them behind, and it's not like, okay, the management has signed something. Other than that, I would twist it and say, make good use of your publisher. Ask them for focus group tests. Ask them to share the feedback. And not just for the standard, localization, publishing, QA, testing, and other services.
Yes, so there are definitely, or there were publishers with dirty tricks. Those publishers are not in our network, but obviously there are publishers that try to take away your IP, that try to maybe scale up their inner costs in a way that you will never see your revenue share, so the recoup period never ends. So there are things that can happen with publishers that are not real partners. But I want to say that most of developers who are blaming publishers and telling crazy stories about publishers, the reality is that they have usually not followed what is in the contract, and then when publishers stop paying, it was not because publisher doesn't want the game to be done. They want to make that game. They want to make money on that game together with developer. But because the risk was too big, the deliveries was not on time, it was not unpredictable anymore, and so on. So we saw many bad contracts, but in most of times the bad stories and bad examples are not because of the publisher try to screw you up, but because developer didn't deliver. One more thing I would say, we have seen really a lot of contracts and feedbacked a lot of contracts, and I can tell now the biggest or very big mistake is that somehow developers from the GPT moment think they are also lawyers. They are not. You don't understand the contracts and the consequences. Neither GPT can tell you easily, and also GPT doesn't cover or doesn't take the responsibility. So please, the contract between you and publisher, that's like the most important point of your cooperation, as it was said. So it makes sense to spend money on it, give it to consulting agency or lawyer who has the knowledge of gaming law, and discuss it with publisher, if you understand those terms correctly, and so on. So don't think, please, you can avoid this and do it with your GPT now.
The one thing for me, I'd say, like one of the biggest things to make sure of is, A, you're basically marrying this person for the next 10 years. So A, make sure there are synergies, you get on, you get all that sort of stuff. The one thing I would say to developers is make sure the milestones work for you. The last thing you want to be doing is crunching for every single milestone. Maybe it's taking the publisher hat off and just a kind person hat on, but make sure you've baked in the contingencies, whether it be time or financially or both. Make sure the milestones work for you, because the contract is there, yes, to bind this relationship together, but in reality, a lot of the stuff is in place as this is a worst case scenario if something happens. You hope it doesn't get there, but that's why these safeguards are in place. So make sure those milestones actually suit you. You know, the publisher isn't asking too much from you with too little time. Make sure it actually works, because that will actually set out a really good foundation for you.
That's a lovely comparison with the marriage. You saw many pitch decks. Now I'd like to kind of, pitch yourself. My question is, do developers need publisher in these days?
It's one of those ones where it depends on what you want, right? If you're happy kind of trying it on your own, you've built your own little community, sure, try self-publishing. You know, you should understand what you want to achieve from your game. You know, if you want to reach a much larger audience, a publisher that has got a great tie into the genre that you're developing for, then yeah, a publisher makes a lot more sense. You know, they can basically reach out to a bunch of people without really doing anything or even having to spend anything. So for me, it's a case of it depends on what you would want from yourselves and what you want from the game. Publisher-wise, every publisher has got specialities. Team 17 has got a couple of different core pillars within the industry. Does your game fit one of them? If not, then maybe Team 17 won't be for you. One thing you need to remember is find the right publisher for you. Because if they're passionate about your project, I can't begin to explain how important that is. You're not just another game in the roster. They genuinely can get behind your game because they believe in it. Team 17 does, an array of different things. So I always say, if you think it might fit, fantastic, come and give me a chat. But I always say, make sure you find the right people. It's not a case of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing which publisher will say yes. That usually doesn't go well. It's a case of find the right partner who, again, you're marrying this person basically for 10 years. That contract is 10 years long. You got to make sure that you like them enough. If you're married yourselves, sometimes you love them while you hate them at the same time. Again, it's just finding the right partner.
I would say that in the end, you should ask yourself, would you do all the publishing work on your own? That maybe answers a lot of questions if a publisher is needed or not. In the end, it's more or less like we talked about marketing, we talked about wish listing, we talked about setting up things like going global, releasing in different territories, on different platforms, on whatsoever. If you want to do that all by yourself, I guess then you might not need the best publisher by your side. If you maybe have some struggles doing everything on your own, a publisher could help.
I would agree to this, yeah. And thinking from a global brand and marketing point of view, you have certain issues to overcome if you want to release your product globally. So do you have someone in your team that speaks Chinese language? Or could treat the Chinese local Weibo, Bilibili, Douyin channels? If you cannot treat this, then you will have a surprise at the release day, because China or Chinese language is the one most played, I think currently the most played language on Steam. So you need to prepare for this. And the same for QA. If your studio is big enough and you want to do a multi-platform title, great. Can you do the pre-cert, the cert? Do you have a release manager that is handling this, that is talking to first party? And if it's, let's say, just so to say, quotation marks, just a PC game, then it's way easier. But the broader you go, the more help you will need. Then same for making a focus group test in China. It's not that easy to organize, yeah? So just circling back to the focus group testing.
It's like super special, like Chinese market.
You
want
cannot,
to get there.
You cannot overlook it now. Yeah, you have to really take care, because the number of players is so big that if there is a gap in the Steam ratings, for example, in the first days, you will see a drop, and suddenly you are mixed or average, and you wonder where this is coming from. And then you look into the data and you see, oh, there's a problem in some regions. Could be China, could be any territory, or could be Germany, because the Germans love RTS and they don't like the game, whatever. But that is something you have to prepare for, and that is basically all publisher work. And QA, it's not only the QA for the game, it's also local QA, what you need to do. And yes, you can go out in early access, English only. Of course, that's doable.
Yes, so I think now time changed a lot, and the developers who are reaching publishers without understanding what they can give them, just expecting them to invest into their game 90% of the development costs, they are gone, at least for some time, I would say. So we have developers now who still want to invest 70% of their budget from publisher side. Let's say they covered somehow the vertical slice production, so they have 20, 30, sometimes 50% of the development cost covered. So they still need publisher as investor as well. But we have also teams that covered the whole costs, and they still are looking for publisher because they understand their chances to succeed in this wild 30K releases per year territory are higher with a publisher, and you can understand why. Each publisher needs to do 3x per game investment or whatever, So they are carefully selecting, and then they have the whole structure built on multiplying, lowering the risk, getting secondary deals. Those are things that are really hard for you to get. Like you will hardly get secondary deal with Orange in France for your game being placed on their store or stuff like that. And those things can sometimes, or the Asian partner who can bring 20% of the dev budget, those things can lower the risk tremendously. And also speaking about local publishers, you don't need only local publisher from point of view of like territory, but you might don't know how to publish physical Switch copies that are still big thing in America, for example. Or you don't know how to distribute some consoles, some like for example the Chinese. Like we have one Chinese publisher who looked at our portfolio of games and say, okay, these games have like 5-7% of sales in China. We can reach 20%, so they can hire the sales number a lot. So publisher, if you understand what do you need, you can either go and like when you are setting up your own PC, take those parts, or you can find the right publisher and then have them covering all of this. And the second option, as Allan said in beginning, if you build your team not around building the game, but understanding how to build the whole retention and community and long-term life ops, then you might not need publisher. But you should be very aware of those things publishers are doing. That's not only QA and localization and nice PR release in the launch time. It's many other things, deals, sub-deals they are usually putting together.
Let's close this part with one fast, simple answer. One advice for developer to get to publisher. Or one advice for developer, with their upcoming game. Or two. Somebody should start, sorry guys.
Maybe it's not the best advice, but it's the first advice that came to my mind when you were asking the question is, I do see that many development studios who come to us with their game pitches are living more or less in today's life, I would say. So talking about the survival horror game super duper hype that we had maybe for the past year or something like that, I wouldn't say that it's the best idea to go for a survival horror game whenever the hype is maybe declining at the moment. So maybe to have a good view into the future, what might be the upcoming theme whenever your game is going to be released, like next year or the year after or whatsoever? What could be the main topic for our gaming community at that time? That could be a small advice, maybe not the best.
If we're talking about a developer bringing games to publishers, my biggest thing that I will always say to developers is obviously bring a pitch deck that is clear. You know, it tells the story, it's got all the important information. But I speak to the build that you share, whether it's a vertical slice or a demo, is just make sure it's fun. And you need to look at that objectively as well. So you need to take off your rose-tinted glasses, get someone who may not have played the game before, and let them tell you if it's fun or not. Because you'll be surprised how important and influential a fun demo is. You know, because capturing that bit of magic is one of the biggest things you need to achieve in building a game. So if you can do that quite early on, for me, that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I could give.
I think, Allan, you nailed it. It's so important to always get a fresh pair of eyes, because both sides, the developer and the publisher, over time of the marriage process, you will get biased, because you know your workaround and you know how to play the game, but you would want to see how it fits to the target audience that has not played it for the last 3 milestones. And another piece of advice is take the feedback from the publisher on the milestones. I mean, you will have to deal with feedback and address this seriously. And the best thing, again, to do is to test it. And you can also do friends and family tests, and or talk to other developers to get help, get an opinion about the demo, and get as many feedback points, touch points as possible.
Yes, you're still talking about marriage. I didn't know that there is this, I need to check my wedding contract, that there is this 10 years clause. But I would say the biggest mistake is for many developers, they don't understand if they are doing it outside of their inner creative pressure, or if they are doing it as a business. And that's, for me, from our experience, the biggest difference. Like, if you treat it as your creative hobby to some extent, then it's fine, but don't expect then someone is giving you money and pushing your idea. That's your responsibility. If you treat it as a business and you do all the research before and you make sure you're focusing on the right audience and you're listening maybe consultants or feedback from publishers and working with that idea and developing it, then you eventually got to the deal and to the release, whether successful, hopefully yes. So I think that's the biggest twist in your mind. If you start treating it as a business, as something that is predictable, you understand the audience, the publisher, look at it from the perspective of like business side, and if it's sellable, that's the first step to be maybe successful, but definitely more predictable with your outcome.
Awesome. I sometimes advise like developers think about the pitch deck like your first marketing campaign. You have to slightly convince the guy on the other side, and as you mentioned, you usually have one shot. So think twice. So this was close the first part, and we are close to the end. But I hope they will give us some time. I want to talk about government or EU support. We just came from Brazil, and in many pitch decks, almost certainly majority, there was like 25% covered by local fund, town fund, state fund. So what do you think in general about the support for the games from state and government? And is it some kind of important for you? Are you interested in the titles which were supported by whatever fund? State fund mostly.
In my experience, it doesn't hurt. It's one of those ones where in the UK and Europe, there's not a great deal but the ones that I've had a lot of experience with is overseas in places like Canada, where they have like it's state-based as well as as part of the country. It's always obviously times have changed with publishers in the sense of they become more risk averse. They want to find ways to to mitigate the risk within the products, and these government schemes can really help. There's people that you can get funding for prototypes. You can get funding once you secure a publisher. It can really help. These can be really, it can make sure that the publisher is, as sad as it is as a business, perspective, it's making it as least risk averse as possible, and it mitigates a lot. So it's a bit of validation as well for you guys as a studio to go, actually, the government has already backed us. They think that this is a good game for the right partner, and then it's a case for you guys to go out and find it.
I just recalled some games from Polish area that are only seeing the day of, the light of day just because they have some governmental funding in between. That would have never happened without the governmental funding. So in this case, that might be a huge issue not to have governmental funding. On the other hand, I do see like a lot of games that come to life without any fundings from every governmental side or something like a tax break or something like that. But in the end, every little helps. So if you get like additional 10% on the budget or something like that, that's even better than before. So for sure.
For example, in Germany, you have the state fund and you have also local funds, and some of these funds you don't even have to pay back. So that's another big advantage, and it's if you can, and it's staggered. If you are a small business or like an indie studio, you get up to 50%. If you are a bigger company, mid-sized company, then the percentage goes down. If you are a big company, then you can maximum get 25%, for example, and that really helps. And that is, I mean, originally that was coming from the movie industry, where a lot of funding was making a lot of products or movies possible that would not have seen the light of day, what Henner said. And I'm not so sure about European, maybe you know more about European funding. There is some game funding, but it's more complicated. And of course, every proof of concept is helpful also in the discussion with the publishers.
Yes, so you know that my long-term dream was that in Czech we will have also funding, and the main reason why we were pushing that was that I could see that in many other countries the development distribution of development studios is way more healthy. As you might not know, that in Czech, we have a big companies like Warhorse and Bohemia Interactive, and they are making 90% of the whole industry income yearly. If you look at Sweden, then the smaller studios, up to 20 guys or so, are doing more than half. The healthiness of industry, the possibility nowadays to make the vertical slice, which is not a cheap thing, and then go to the publisher. I think that's what the funding should be mainly about. Yes, it should also enable some special games to happen. Games that are not necessarily focused on the profitability. But main purpose, from my point of view, is to stay competitive, and how are the prices of work now. So I really think, funding, and we see it in the titles we are signing or presenting to publishers, those titles that have some funding and are lowering the risk this way have higher chance to be signed.
So I'm glad that you have the microphones, because you were like key member of the group, lobbying group, which helped to get games into the audiovisual law, kind of. You mentioned how to back the fount, to the original fount, even if it's government on another fount. And currently, if I understand, and correct me, currently there is on the table that 20% will get back in recoup phase, up to 200% investment. So I hope I'm clear, and I would like to know what's your point of view as a publisher, that you will have somebody in recoup phase who's gonna recoup with you. Was it clear? Like, did I say it right? Perfect.
I mean, terms like that become quite challenging because the idea of these funding that these developers are getting is to help support them through the varying stages of development. Whether it's prototype funding or funding through the development of the game, yeah, we want to be risk averse, but at the end of the day, we don't want to see developers then struggle once the game is then released. We like to see these government schemes brought in to help bolster a very rapidly growing industry. Some smaller countries could do with some more support for the smaller developers, as Henner said, that without this funding, they wouldn't have got off the ground. That they'll be struggling, and we would never have got that game. So I think that when these government funding kind of grants come through and schemes, it really does need to just support the wider opportunity rather than it being a return of investment for 200% of of the recoup or whatever's owed to the developer. I think it just needs to be a little bit smarter in making sure that when a publisher sees what these terms are, a lot of publishers wouldn't want the developer to then be struggling for a few years after the release, because it doesn't speak to a great long-term partnership, because they're going to be struggling even though we've had a really successful game.
You don't want your partner to struggle in marriage, like.
Well, again, it comes back to the marriage part.
Being brutally honest, I would say that in any kind of way, a recoupment on something is something like a tax, and you only pay taxes when you have some incomes. So in the end, it's nothing like I wouldn't go only for something like a gift from anybody, just funding your game, your studio, something like that, and just relax on it and just feel like you're paid like an employee or something like that. In the end, it's more or less like it's getting you from crawling to running, and that's how it's supposed to be. And whenever you're running, you have to pay something back to some other fund givers or whatsoever. So I'm not really sure if I'm really struggling with the model. I'm more or less struggling with the situation whenever you are receiving any funds. So take care of it, because it's only making you better and not really like richer.
Absolutely, and I would second that by saying the more complexity you add to the waterfall, from the money that has been made, and the VAT goes down, the store share, and so on, the less interesting is any of these kind of funding, because then it's treated like a licensing fee, and that is then complicated, and especially with the revenue in games or in premium games, where you have then a decline after the first chunk goes out, and then you might struggle after a long while when you have to mark down products, and then would you then go back to the one that have given you money at the first place, say, oh, by the way, again, now you have to put money on the table? They would struggle understanding that business, I think.
Yeah, I am happy to hear those opinions, because that is also what I'm still trying to present to those guys who are now forming the final terms. But if I look at it from the perspective of deals we were setting in past years, 100% recoup from publisher side, it was standard, and it is still the most common thing. So putting like 20% recoup from day one into any form of grant, it will definitely complicate most of the deals on the table. And there are some deals, like very few deals we worked with recoup that is 90 or 80% or even 70 in some big games. But in most cases, this is kind of publisher willing to invest into the studio, even in that phase, so the studio can work on DLCs, work on other content. It's not so the studio can just return the grant. So I think this is the most tricky part, and I'm pretty sure, based on the bigger data, you can tell that it's complicated most of the deals now.
We are kind of running out of time, but I would love to get a chance to give us some questions. But I must ask about we are in Czech Republic, so your point of view about the Czech market, or possibly your favorite Czech game. It's not necessary to start.
It's skipping me, yes.
I'm biased. Of course, I'm a big fan of KCD.
I'm sorry. I just have to add that Mario yesterday showed up in like hoodie, Warhorse, and KCD. So brilliant stuff.
Yeah. Sorry for this. Yeah.
I'm still living in the best remembrance of my best project that I found, and it was actually in Czech, in Prague with 1C, and we found with a German co-publisher, Arma, Armed is Sold by Bohemia, and released that in German retail. My only number one, so I still remember it very, very in my heart.
You can give it to Vlad.
All right, so the place for your questions. Anybody? Brilliant. Just scream it at me, and I'll, repeat it for the stream.
I've got actually a couple of. At the first, I would like to not know how many thousands of pages you actually be reading. Obviously, it was a lot. But how many actually games did you publish, and which was the best title for you? What was the best deal?
So I will repeat it. How many games you published, and what was the best deal? From your portfolio.
Which title? Yeah, which title was the
Which title exactly?
Is in like my favorite title that I published.
Yeah. It's like with kids, It's like with kids, which one is your favorite?
So if you're asking for my career-wise, which one I like most, I guess it's the one that was the previous company that I worked for was a game called Mouse, PI for Hire. And as I mentioned, I see so many pitches, there's thousands upon thousands of pitches. And again, there's a lot that are the same. And then there comes along one or two pitches that are just so starkingly new and so different that it just kind of perks you up and go, wow, like, how's no one thought of this before? So when we first saw this kind of like rubber hose animation, you just thought, wow, this could be something, or it could flop. Again, had no one done it for a reason. And it released, I think, like 3 weeks ago, and it's already doing incredibly well. So, sometimes I'm very happy to have been part of the journey with the developer. It was a challenging opportunity to work with. Don't get me wrong. All games come with their challenges, but I'd say that was the one that, while I've been in publishing, 7 or 8 years, I think that's kind of been my favorite one. It was just that one pitch that came through that, really perked up my interest to go, wow, this is really different. Not saying that the other games I haven't seen have been fantastic, but this one was just very, very unique in the sense of I've not seen it before.
And how many did you publish? How many titles?
So myself, that I've probably published, I'd say maybe a dozen, like 12 to 15 titles. Because the span of my career, I helped Quali build their publishing arm and then moved on. I then helped Jagex build their publishing arm and then moved on.
So we're talking about thousands of the...
So when I'm at these studios, when I'm helping them build these publishing arms, I'm kind of I'm helping them build, but I'm also reviewing all of the opportunities that are coming in. So basically, it's kind of twofold. This is why I've been at the grassroots of now 4 different publishers. So I'm basically still boots on the ground, but still working with kind of like the senior management. So I still get to see all of the stuff that's coming through. And I will still, to this day, my Friday afternoon is blocked out for testing games. You know, I know Boohoo, you know, he gets to play games for a living, but every Friday of every week of the last 7 or 8 years, it's for playtesting. So there's no meetings, and it's all playtesting on a Friday. So that's how I've kind of seen so many.
That was nice HR stuff for Team
Yeah,
17.
don't tell people that.
So best game I published, I'm legally forced to say Tropico because it's our main brand and maybe the best game I personally have played in my life. And in the end, it's more or less like I still remember the best game pitch I've ever had, and that might be the one that could have been the best that I could have published, but it was. I have to tell you, the game.
You
was
have to
called-
right now. Yeah, you have to.
The game was called Who Killed Mario? Sorry, and it was Mario being killed in a retirement home where every game character you can imagine live, and you have something like a Cluedo thing, so you have to get behind the scenes and find out who killed Mario actually. And the game pitch itself was so nice, and I sat there and I was wondering, so Lara Croft was on crutches, and Spy Fox was one eye blinded, and Mario was drawn to something like, I can't even say in English, whatever might be the thing. So it really was like super fun, and I thought, who the F might be the one on holding these IP rights, giving you the rights to make only fun out of your best characters, all living in a retirement home. But I loved the game pitch.
It's kind of a retirement astrobot, kind of, you know, it's different ways. Use all your characters.
I think one of the part of the question was involvement into products. I think I brought like 300 products or supported them from the marketing side and brought them to life and help not on the producing but on the sales and communication side. I am listed in about 100 games in Mobi, so that's I think quite a good number. I don't have one particular game other than Sunstrike 4 that I would call out here, but what I really liked, and that is especially from the marketing point of view, when I was working for over a decade with Sega, Square Enix, Koei Tecmo, and a lot of other distribution partners, you had to switch the hats very fast. So on Monday you had to be Sonic, on Tuesday you had to be Lara Croft, on Wednesday it was Risen or Gothic, and so on. And that what is really great, that you can switch into so many roles, which is for me also part of why the job is fun and why marketing is fun in games.
Yeah, I try to maybe take it also from the our perspective. So the mid-size publisher receives something like 2,000 to 4,000 pitch decks per year, at least from data we know, and they sign like 4 games per year. So that was also one of the main reasons why we try to automate this thing with our sale platform, because it's really about presenting the right game to the right publisher. And if you have matrix of like hundreds, thousands of games and 200 publishers, you need to have clever automation to present the right publishers, the right games, in the right moment, connected to their internal or data we know internally. We don't obviously expose them. Connected to the data we take out of the Steam, so we can put it to in a perspective to the publisher. So there is, if I simplify, something like if you take 4 games out of 2,000, you know, relatively low chance if you don't have that special treatment, or you know, if your game is really not very well focused on the particular publisher.
That was a very nice presentation of Sale.game platform. Is Okay, so last one, please.
What is the right time for the developer to actually go to publisher? What is the right time in the development line? You say, okay, you've been on the next fast. That's not for me. The game is already gone. I could make lots of wish lists. But what if I've already been there, or whatever? What is the best time during the development to actually approach the publisher?
Best time in a development process to approach publisher. Máš mikrofon.
Okay, I'll try to be fast, and I can tell you what is the wrong time. So wrong time is, for example, when you're out of money in a month, because the deal takes 6-9 months easily, and the deal is not only the deal, but finding the right publisher, setting up the deal, and starting the production and having money being on your account. So definitely you need to have this in your head. So you cannot be in the time pressure, and you should definitely. Nowadays we are not taking under our roof games without good vertical slice, without a team that can survive this period. So basically, this is the wrong time, as I say. The right time, probably guys can tell better.
I mean, you said it, yeah. Ideally, there's vertical slides, a demo, proof of what you think. You can then extrapolate to a full game. That's what I see as a good time or right time.
I definitely agree, and maybe if you feel comfortable, then maybe you should give it to some other development studio and just test it like in a dry run and give it like to them, and they would say, that's way too less. Or they would say something like, oh, I see you are very, very far down the road with your game, something like that. So I guess you're mostly blind in your project because you hopefully invented it and you created it. But in the end, the correct or the right moment, you define by yourself.
I think majority of it has been said, to be honest, but it's a case of, for me, it's the moment you can take off, you have a build that you believe is fun, it's fairly comprehensive, showcases the core loop of the game. Take off the rose-tinted glasses, get someone to come and play it, and let them be honest. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it fun? Is it boring? And take it on board. And if they, after getting some people in and they go, this is fun, you've captured what the special essence of what this game is, sure. That would be a good time to approach, a publisher, because you've got the pitch deck, which is always supporting documentation. This shouldn't just be they buy into it from that. They need to play it. And then if they play it and they believe it's just as fun as you believe, that is a great kind of synergy between the two and a good opportunity for the game to move on to the next stage.
If I can add super quickly. I think also one more thing, it's not a moment, because it's from our experience at least, it's a period, and in that period, I think it's important to keep convincing publishers, keep reacting on their feedback. Like in most cases, we sign some games that are not in alpha stage already with a lot of wish lists. It was when we were reactful, where we worked with those feedbacks and sent quickly back something that still, is our vision, but reflecting the feedback and working on other things that can convince in the meanwhile, getting grant, getting some best demo awards, being somewhere in IGN, whatever. So it is period in which you need to work with those publishers and kind of, keep them interested. So the first time is the demo. The good demo is the hook, but then you need to spend, time to attracting them long time enough.
Thank you. We have to wrap it up. So thank you very much, Allan Adham, Henner Bruhn, Mario Gerhold, Vladimír Gersl, please applause. Thanks Anifilm for having us. Thank you Teresa and Misha for kind of survive the struggle with stream. Thank you whoever watching it online, and see you tomorrow 10:30 on Game Pitch Arena. Have a nice evening. Cheers.